That's my ex-wife. The words were heavy, like a big stone dropped in water. They broke the happy music of the fancy restaurant. A few minutes earlier, everything had been perfect. Alistair Vance, a rich man who was the boss of a big company, sat across from Serafina, his new girlfriend. They were on their very first date, smiling, laughing, enjoying dinner. But then, everything changed. A beautiful black woman walked into the restaurant. She was pregnant, her hand resting gently on her round belly. Her face glowed softly, and her eyes were calm but strong. Alistair froze. Serafina noticed him staring. She tilted her head and asked, "Who is she?" Alistair's heart pounded. He wanted to lie, to say the woman was just someone he barely knew. But instead, the truth slipped out of his mouth. "That's my ex-wife." The words left him slowly, like he was admitting something terrible. Serafina's blue eyes widened, her wineglass stopping halfway to her lips. She looked at him with sharp curiosity, though her face stayed calm. The piano music still played. Waiters moved quietly between tables with glowing candles. Outside, the city lights sparkled against the glass windows. But at Alistair's table, the air felt heavy. The night had started so well. Alistair wore a dark gray suit that made him look calm and powerful. He had chosen the best table in the corner, soft golden lights glowing above them. It was private, with a view of the shining skyline. Serafina had walked in right on time, wearing a pale silk dress that shimmered like champagne. She smiled like someone used to being admired. Their talk had been easy, about art, buildings, charities, and little flirty jokes. Alistair had felt good, until the door opened. At first, he hadn't noticed the woman. He only felt the room change, like when someone very important enters. Then he turned his head and froze. His fork hung in the air, his chest tightened. There she was. Her name was Luma. Her hair was different now, in soft curls he didn't remember, but the way she stood, strong and graceful, was the same. It had been 5 years since he last saw her. 5 years since he left her in a tiny half-furnished apartment with only bills and a whispered apology. Back then, Alistair had nothing. No company, no riches, no fine suit. Only dreams, debts, and fear. He told himself leaving Luma was the kind thing to do, that she deserved better than a man who might fail. He called it mercy, but really it had been fear. And now, seeing her again, that story he told himself fell apart. "Alistair," Serafina said again, her voice slower this time. "Who is she?" She was looking at Luma, who was now being seated at a table across the room. Luma sat calmly, her belly clear, her face peaceful. "That's my ex-wife," Alistair repeated, almost choking on the words. Serafina raised her eyebrow. "Your ex-wife? You never told me you were married before." Alistair looked at his plate, unable to eat. "It was a different life," he muttered. "Before the company, before all this." Serafina's eyes studied him. She wasn't angry, just careful, like someone trying to figure out a riddle. "She's pregnant," Serafina said softly. Then her voice sharpened. "Is it yours?" Alistair let out a sharp breath. "No, we haven't spoken in years." But even as he said it, a whisper of doubt touched him. He didn't know who the father was. He didn't know anything about her life now, not what art she loved, where she lived, what books she read at night, or what songs she sang when no one was watching. All he knew was that seeing her again hurt like a train crashing into him. Serafina's hand rested on his. Her voice was gentle. "Alistair, are you still in love with her?" It wasn't a trick or a trap. She wanted the truth. But Alistair couldn't answer. His heart was too full. Memories came rushing back, the tiny apartment, her smile, the way she had believed in him when he had nothing. Outside, the stars shimmered above the restless city. Inside, Alistair sat in silence, unsure if he was looking at the past or the start of something new. He glanced at Luma again. She looked calm, almost glowing, as if she hadn't even seen him. Or maybe she had, but chose not to care. That stung more than anger. If she didn't react at all, it meant she had truly moved on. The waiter came back with their food, but Alistair didn't touch it. The salmon cooled on his plate, forgotten. Serafina looked at him carefully. Her eyes no longer sparkled with amusement. She looked at him like a puzzle she never wanted to solve. "I didn't know you were married," she said quietly. Alistair forced himself to meet her eyes. "It was a long time ago, before everything took off, back when I could barely pay rent." "And you just never thought to mention it?" she asked. He took a sip of water, his throat dry. "I thought it didn't matter anymore, that it was part of a life I'd left behind, but tonight, I see I've been lying to myself." Serafina didn't blink. She just kept watching him. "You said she's your ex-wife," she pressed. "And now she's pregnant with someone else's child, I assume?" Alistair nodded. "You assume," she repeated. "You don't know for sure." "No," Alistair admitted. "I don't. We haven't spoken in years." But the image of Lulma, glowing under the lights, hand resting on her belly, wouldn't leave his mind. "You looked like you'd seen a ghost," Serafina said softly, "like the floor dropped beneath you. I've never seen you like that." Alistair leaned back, shoulders stiff. Silence felt safer, but Serafina deserved better. She had always been honest. Now he owed her honesty too. "When I met her," he began, "I had nothing. We lived in a small apartment with a broken heater and an old, noisy fridge. But she believed in me, like she believed in my dream when no one else did." Serafina stayed quiet, so he went on, his words rushing out. "Then things got hard, really hard. I told myself she deserved better than to suffer with me. I said letting her go was an act of love, but really I was just scared. Scared of failing with her watching, scared of being weak in her eyes." "So you disappeared?" Serafina asked softly. Alistair nodded. "I divorced her, packed everything into a box, changed my number, moved into a tiny office, buried myself in work until the company finally grew." The air between them grew heavier, not from shouting, not from anger, but from a deep understanding that cut sharper than anger ever could. "And you never reached out again?" Serafina asked. Alistair's jaw tightened. "I couldn't. Every time I thought of it, I felt like I had lost the right. She deserved peace, not me, crawling back with guilt." Silence wrapped around them. The soft laughter from other tables, the clink of glasses, the piano's gentle song, it all sounded far away. A waiter came to the table with the bill. He didn't know if he should give it, but Alistair waved him away without even looking. Serafina's voice sounded softer now, almost tired. "Do you still love her?" she asked. Alistair didn't answer right away. He wasn't sure of the truth, or maybe he was just scared to say it out loud. He looked at Serafina, not as the person who caused the storm, but as the woman sitting in front of him, caught in it without any fault of her own. "I think I never really stopped," he said at last, speaking very quietly. "Not because I want to go back, not because I miss the past, but because I never faced what I left behind. I thought building this big business would take away the emptiness. I thought each success would stop the guilt, but it never did." Serafina sat very still. She didn't touch her glass again. She didn't look away either, but there was a small change in her posture. Alistair could tell she was already pulling away, already protecting her heart, because she saw the end before he even said it. "Alistair," she said gently, "thank you for being honest. I really do appreciate it, but I don't think I'm the right person for you to tell this to." Alistair nodded, a dull ache growing behind his eyes. "I know." She stood up slowly, holding her clutch bag and her pride all in one graceful movement. "Take care of yourself," she said. Then she paused, her eyes staying on him a little longer. "And maybe, if you can, tell her everything you just told me, before it's too late." Then she walked away, leaving Alistair alone at the table. The food stayed untouched. The weight of 5 lost years pressed on him, and the quiet sound of a future that had just changed direction again filled the room. The art gallery didn't look like much from the outside. It was hidden between an old warehouse and a small coffee shop, with mismatched chairs outside. In the old days, Alistair would have walked past without noticing. His mind was always full of reports and meetings. But today, as he stepped out of his shiny black car and onto the rough sidewalk, the building seemed important. Above the door was a mural, a big painting with warm, earthy colors showing mothers and children. It caught his eye and made him pause. He wasn't here by chance. He had searched for her on purpose, typing her name into search bars like a guilty man dialing a number he shouldn't call. And now he stood in front of her world, hoping for something he couldn't even name. Inside, the gallery smelled of paint and wood polish. Sunlight poured through tall windows, shining on the polished concrete floors. On the walls were colorful, textured artworks that told stories Alistair had never heard in his rich office life. There were pictures of women in traditional dresses, paintings of birth and motherhood, and woven tapestries that looked like living memories. Alistair looked at everything slowly, his hands in his pockets. He didn't know if he came for the art or for the woman who made it. Either way, his heart pounded, full of nervous hope. He didn't see her at first. Maybe he expected her to appear suddenly, like in a movie. But this wasn't a movie. This was real life. He walked around until he stopped in front of a photograph of a pregnant woman standing in a river, water up to her knees, arms raised, her face lifted toward the sky. The picture felt powerful, wild, and free. He stared at it for a long time. Then a voice broke the silence, calm and steady. "I didn't expect to see you here." Alistair turned quickly. The voice felt like thunder to him. And there she was, Zawadi. She stood a few feet away, arms gently folded over her round belly. She wore a black wrap dress that fit her gracefully. Her hair was braided back, and her eyes, the eyes he once knew better than his own reflection, watched him carefully. They weren't cold, but they weren't open either. "Lama," he whispered. She gave a small nod, polite but not warm. "Are you here for the exhibit, or is this just a coincidence?" Alistair could have lied. He could have said he was just passing by, but this was her place, and her place demanded honesty. "I saw you the other night," he admitted, "at the restaurant. I didn't know how to speak then, but I had to see if you were okay." Her smile came slowly, but it didn't touch her eyes. "I'm more than okay, Alistair, but thank you for asking." A visitor passed them, whispering about a painting. Zawadi's eyes followed the visitor briefly, then returned to him. "I'm working, as you can see. The gallery closes in 20 minutes. Alistair felt the ground shift under his feet. She wasn't unkind, but she was strong and calm. This was not the woman he had left years ago. That woman had been hurt and broken. This woman had rebuilt herself. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Alistair said. I don't even know. I guess I wanted to acknowledge you, to say something, even if it's late." 5 years is more than late," she said. Her words weren't cruel, they were just true. Alistair nodded slowly, swallowing the shame inside him. "Can I buy you coffee?" he asked quietly. "Or tea? I'm not here to create drama. I just want half an hour, that's all." She tilted her head, studying him carefully, like she was checking if he was real or just pretending. Then, to his surprise, she nodded. "There's a cafe next door. I can spare 30 minutes. They walked to the cafe. It was cozy inside, with warm lamps and the smell of cinnamon and honey. She ordered herbal tea. He ordered black coffee, but didn't touch it. They sat by the window. Silence stretched between them like a tight string. "You look different," she said finally, her eyes not quite meeting his. "Success suits you." He gave a short laugh, without joy. "You look strong, happier." "I am," she said with a small smile. Her hand rested on her belly. "She's due in 3 months." "She?" Alistair asked. "A daughter," Zawadi replied. His heart stumbled. In another life, that daughter could have been theirs. "And the father?" he asked gently. "There isn't one, not in the usual way," she said calmly. "I used a donor." Alistair stared at her, filled with both awe and guilt. "That's brave," he whispered. "It's what's right for me," she answered firmly. Alistair lowered his eyes, tracing the rim of his cup. "I owe you more than just an apology. I owe you the truth." "Then say it," she said. "Whatever you came here to say." Alistair looked at her, his words coming from deep inside. "I was a coward. I told myself leaving you was a kindness, that you deserved better than a man drowning in debt and fear. But the truth is, I didn't think I was enough. So I ran. She didn't speak at first. Her face stayed unreadable. Then she said, "You're not the same man who walked out that night. I can see that. But remember, growth doesn't erase the damage. It just shows the story didn't end there." Her words were kinder than he expected. They stood to leave. Alistair felt lighter, as if the heavy weight he had carried for years cracked just enough to let air inside. Not forgiveness, not promises, but a beginning. The cafe was calm. Cups clinked behind the counter. Steam hissed from the espresso machine. Quiet voices murmured around them. But at their window seat, time felt different. The evening light turned golden, touching Zawadi's face as she looked at Alistair. Her fingers circled her teacup slowly. She looked calm, not tense, not angry, just centered. Alistair leaned forward, elbows on the table, bracing himself. He hadn't expected her to agree to this meeting. Now he realized he hadn't prepared for what it meant to sit across from her, the woman who had become stronger without him. There was no bitterness in her eyes, no anger, just peace. "I meant what I said earlier," Alistair began, his voice low. "You're different now, in a good way. I didn't expect to see you so at peace." "That's because you remember me from when I was trying to carry both of us," she said softly. "I was burning out, Alistair, but I didn't know it." He looked surprised. "You always seemed so strong. You held everything together when I couldn't." She smiled faintly. "I was strong, yes, but strength without support is just survival, and you weren't there to share it." Alistair lowered his eyes. Her words hurt, but they were true. "I told myself I left to protect you," he whispered. "That stepping aside was noble, that I was giving you a better life." "You left to protect yourself from the shame of failure," she said gently. "Don't twist it into something romantic." The words hit him hard, but he knew she was right. Her eyes softened again. "But you were right about one thing. I did get a better life, just not the one either of us imagined." Alistair blinked, not sure what to say. "You are raising a baby all by yourself," he finally said. "That must be really hard." The woman, Zawadi, gave a soft laugh. It was not mean, but warm and real. "Life is never easy," she said, "but I made this choice because I wanted to, and that makes it different." Alistair tilted his head. "You didn't want to wait for the right husband or partner first?" Zawadi looked into his eyes without fear. "I stopped thinking that a partner must come first before becoming a mother. I didn't want to risk my dream just because someone else wasn't ready. I wanted to be a mom, not someday in the future, not if everything lined up perfectly, but because it was something deep inside me. I didn't need someone to finish that picture. I just needed to be brave and draw it in a new way." Her voice was strong, but also soft, and Alistair felt it touch his heart like a sharp mirror. He looked at her with both respect and sadness. "You became the person I always knew you could be," he whispered. "The person I was not strong enough to stay with." Zawadi nodded, as if she had already accepted this truth long ago. "We both made choices," she said. "Some out of fear, others out of freedom. This baby, this life I built, it came from freedom, not fear." Alistair felt her words settle inside him like a heavy stone. This was not just about her pregnancy or his old regrets. It was about how their lives had gone in two very different directions. Hers was about moving forward, his was about looking back. "Do you ever think about the life we almost had together?" he asked. His voice was curious, not desperate. "Sometimes," she said honestly. "But I don't think of it as a dream anymore. I see it like a drawing plan that doesn't fit the house I'm building now. I've grown past it, and I'm okay with that." Alistair watched the light shine on her teacup. "And me?" he asked suddenly. "Did you outgrow me too?" The question even surprised him. But once it was out, it hung in the air like smoke. Zawadi did not flinch. "You are part of a chapter that helped shape me," she said, "but I am not defined by you leaving or coming back. The version of you I loved, he left, and I cried for him. Now what's left is respect and curiosity. But love, that's not something I carry anymore. It's not an open wound now. Alistair leaned back, his chest tight. He felt both loss and comfort at the same time. I deserve that, he said quietly. You don't owe me forgiveness. She shook her head. I'm not here to punish you. Life already did that in its own way, but I hope you forgive yourself. You've been running from your past for so long. Maybe now it's time to live in your present. The server came back to clear their cups. He smiled politely, but neither of them smiled back. Outside, the sun had dropped behind the tall buildings, making long shadows across the sidewalk. Zawadi stood up first, pulling her coat over her shoulders. Alistair stood too, unsure if he should speak or just let her walk away. Before she left, she looked at him one last time. You asked for 30 minutes, she said softly. You got them. Maybe that's enough for now. Then she walked out, her shape strong against the fading golden light. Alistair stayed by the window, staring at his own reflection, listening to the echo of a woman who had finally chosen herself. The boardroom was strangely quiet. The air smelled of money, work, and cold ambition. Alistair sat at the head of the long table. His suit jacket was folded on the chair. His sleeves were rolled up, as if hard work could keep him tied to the man he once was. Across the table, digital screens flashed with charts, bar graphs, and numbers, but Alistair barely noticed. The voices around him sounded far away, muffled by the echo of Zawadi's words. The way she had chosen herself so clearly, the way her voice had ended something inside him. He should have cared about the numbers. A year ago, he would have argued over every detail, pressed his team for sharper plans, worried about every dollar. But now, as his senior director finished his big presentation, Alistair just nodded, as if none of it mattered anymore. People asked questions about restructuring. Someone else suggested a business deal in Berlin. Alistair gave a polite, empty smile, one that bought him a few minutes of silence. After the meeting, he didn't go back to his office. He walked past his assistant, ignoring the blinking phone filled with voicemails. He stepped into the elevator without a word. The mirrored walls showed him a man he hardly knew anymore. A man dressed in success, polished and shiny, but empty inside. As the doors closed, Alistair loosened his tie. The fabric dropped limp against his chest, like the heavy role he no longer wanted to play. When he stepped out onto the street, the city looked the same but felt different. The tall glass towers still shone, the sidewalks still buzzed with people, the taxis still honked. But Alistair no longer moved at that pace. He called a cab, not to his rich apartment or his office, but to the old part of the city, the place where his memories still lived, where life had once been simple, raw and real. The streets there were smaller, cracked, and lined with grass pushing through broken sidewalks. The buildings looked tired but unashamed. The corner store still leaned slightly, as if time had gently pushed it. Alistair stepped out of the cab and walked with care. He stopped in front of a red brick apartment building he hadn't seen since the night he left. The night he carried one suitcase and walked away from the life that had meant everything. The building was the same, old, tired. But standing there, Alistair felt ghosts stir inside him. He remembered the radiator hissing at night, the windows whistling in the wind, Zawadi humming as she painted at the kitchen table, sleeves rolled up, hair tied high. He remembered the little arguments, the cheap noodle dinners, the kisses full of hope. Most of all, he remembered the man he'd been before he believed he had to be more. He didn't go inside. He didn't need to. The past wasn't in the walls. It was inside him, louder than ever. He stood there until the cold reached his bones. Then he turned and walked away. That night, he wrote an email to his company. It was simple. He was leaving. No timeline, no promises. If the company couldn't survive without him, then he had built something too weak anyway. By morning, his out-of-office reply was already active. The world would spin without Alistair Vance at its center. 2 days later, he was in a very different place, a small community center. The ceiling was low. It smelled like crayons, books, and floor cleaner. Children laughed in another room. Volunteers handed out snacks. Alistair signed in with shaky hands. He told the director he didn't want to lead. He just wanted to help, sweep floors, set up chairs, clean brushes, read books, anything. At first, people looked at him strangely. A man with shiny shoes and fancy suits didn't seem to belong among glue sticks and crackers. But Alistair learned quickly. He traded his watch for a simple hoodie. He carried paint buckets, knelt on sticky floors to help kids color, read stories with patience. Here, no one cared who he used to be, and for the first time in years, he didn't care either. He ate less, but tasted more, slept lighter, but more peacefully, walked more, thought slower, felt deeper. At night, he sometimes drew in a notebook, sketches of old memories, light in a hallway, the sound of Zawadi's laugh, the way her hand touched her belly in the cafe. Not because he regretted, but because he wanted to remember. He wasn't planning to run back to her. He wasn't planning a big gesture, but he knew he couldn't keep living while dragging the ghost of the man who had always looked back. He returned to the past, not to grab it, but to understand it. And by doing so, he began to feel whole. The rain came suddenly, hitting the gallery windows like drums. Inside, Zawadi stood at the desk, one hand holding her belly, the other gripping the counter. Her face was pale, her lips pressed together tightly, her eyes flickered with panic. She had been working on a new art show when the pain started. At first, she thought it was just practice pains, but now her vision blurred and she could hardly stand. "Should I call someone?" the young assistant asked nervously. Zawadi nodded. Her breath was short. "My doctor," she whispered. "And Alistair. Call Alistair." The name surprised even her. She hadn't planned to say it, but when the pain grew stronger, when her calm began to fall apart, his name came out like a reflex. Not because she depended on him, but because long ago he had been the one she trusted most. A small part of her still believed he would come. When Alistair got the call, he was sitting on the floor of the community center, reading a dragon story to a group of children. His phone buzzed. For a moment, he wanted to ignore it, but something inside told him to answer. The assistant's voice rushed through. Zawadi, pain, hospital, early labor, alone. Alistair didn't think, he just moved. He handed the book to another volunteer, apologized to the children, and rushed out. The drive to the hospital passed in a blur of red lights and wet roads. He held the wheel tightly, his mind racing with every memory of Zawadi, the cafe, her words, her laughter, her baby. He wasn't the father. He wasn't even invited. But none of that mattered now. When he arrived at the hospital, Zawadi had already been admitted. A nurse at the desk knew Alistair's name. She pointed to a quiet room down the hall. Alistair walked inside, and the world seemed to shrink around him. Zawadi was lying on the bed, resting against a big pile of pillows. Her hospital gown was messy, sweat was on her face, and her breathing was hard but steady. Even with all the wires and machines, she looked strong. She was tired, but she was still the same Zawadi. She turned her head slowly, her eyes finding his. For a moment, they just looked at each other without speaking. Then, through a heavy breath, she whispered, "You came." Alistair walked to her side right away. He pulled a chair close and held her hand with both of his. "Of course I came," he said softly, his voice shaking. "You called me?" he asked. She gave a tiny nod. Her grip tightened when another wave of pain came. Alistair watched as she fought through it without a sound. She was so strong, even when she was hurting. "It's too early," she said after the pain passed. "The baby isn't ready. They are trying to stop it." Alistair looked into her eyes. He didn't see fear exactly, but he saw the weight of a woman who had already fought so much. "You're not alone," he said. "Not anymore." They stayed together for hours. Doctors came and went. Machines beeped. Nurses fixed wires and IVs. But Alistair never left her side. He held her hand, brought her water, and put cool cloths on her forehead. Once, she fell into a light sleep. Alistair sat there, just watching her chest rise and fall, the sound of her breathing steady. Time felt slow, and the world outside the room didn't matter anymore. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't dramatic. It was real, raw, and close in a way only hard moments could make. When she woke again, it was after midnight. The worst had passed. The contractions slowed, the medicine worked, and the baby had calmed down. Alistair let out a deep breath he didn't know he was holding. Zawadi turned her head toward him. Her face was softer now. "You didn't have to stay," she whispered. He shook his head. "Yes, I did." For a while they sat in silence. No need for words. Then she spoke again, her voice quiet. "I didn't expect this to mean anything," she said, "but it does." Alistair looked at her, his eyes heavy from tiredness and something more tender. "I meant what I said before," he replied. "I don't want forgiveness just because you feel sorry for me, but I also don't want to disappear again." She reached out her hand and placed it gently on top of his. "I don't know what this is," she admitted, "but I know how it feels. Safe, familiar, simple, even when it's not." Alistair smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. "Maybe that's enough for now." The nurse came back to check Zawadi's vitals. Things looked better. The crisis was over, but she had to stay in the hospital a little longer. After the nurse left, Alistair fixed the blanket around her shoulders. "I'll be right here," he promised. "Sleep. I'll keep watch." And she did. Not because she needed protection, but because, for the first time in a long while, she let someone share the weight with her. As she drifted into sleep again, Alistair sat watching her breathing, the machines blinking quietly, and the first light of dawn touching the hospital window. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But tonight, he had stayed. That was a beginning. The baby didn't come early. Not yet. But that scary night had changed something inside both of them. After that, a gentle rhythm grew between Alistair and Zawadi. Like a new song they were learning to play together. They didn't talk about it. There were no big promises, just small actions. Alistair started showing up more. Not in a way that bothered her. Not in a way she didn't want. But he came, and he was welcome. He brought groceries when she was too tired. He drove her to appointments when the buses were too slow. He never stayed unless she asked. He never expected anything. But he was there. They talked more too. Softly, carefully, like two explorers walking on thin ice. They talked about the baby's name, paint colors for the house, and how she wanted the nursery to look. Slowly, they began to imagine a future with each other again. One afternoon, after a doctor's visit, Zawadi asked Alistair to drive her somewhere. They stopped in a quiet neighborhood with tall trees, bird songs, and laundry lines between porches. She stopped in front of a small brick house. The shutters were old, and a "for sale" sign leaned in the yard. She touched her belly gently. "It's not much," she whispered, "but it has a backyard. It's quiet. I can see her here." Alistair looked at the old house. He didn't see broken steps or an aging roof. He saw what she saw. Possibility. "Let's go inside," he said. The realtor was late, so they waited in the driveway, talking about little things. When they finally went inside, the house smelled of cedar and dust. The floors creaked and the walls were old, but sunlight streamed through the windows. Zawadi walked from room to room, imagining her baby's cries in the hallway, where the crib might stand, where paintings might hang. Alistair followed, his heart moving with her steps. He knew this moment belonged to her, but he hoped maybe he could belong to it too. Days later, when the offer was accepted, she let him help with the paperwork. He didn't push. He only said, "Whatever you need," and he meant it. He bought the first chair for the front porch, a rocking chair she once admired. He left it there with a note, "In case you want to be sung to sleep under the stars." She didn't call to say thanks, but later that night he got a photo of the chair with a single heart emoji. When moving day came, Alistair took time off work. He carried boxes, built furniture, fixed doors, and painted walls. Zawadi's belly was round and full now. She moved slower, but she insisted on unpacking her books herself. Some things must be done with care, she said with a smile. Alistair understood. It wasn't just about books. It was about making the home hers. One morning, after building the crib, Alistair sat in the backyard under a big tree, wiping sweat from his face. Zawadi brought him 2 glasses of cold water. They sat together in the shade. "This feels real now," she said. "It is real," Alistair answered. She looked at him. "You've changed," she said softly. "Not just your clothes or your job, something deeper." Alistair thought, then said, "I had to. The man I was couldn't have built this, couldn't have stayed still long enough to see it." Then she asked something that surprised him. "If I asked, would you want your name on the birth certificate?" He froze for a moment. Not because he didn't want it, but because she asked. "Yes," he said, "if you'll let me." The wind moved through the branches. Something strong settled between them. That night, they carried the last box inside. At the front door, Alistair put his hand gently over hers. "This is home," he whispered. They didn't kiss. They didn't say the word love. But when the porch light turned on and their shadows stretched side by side across the floor, neither of them moved away. Together, in that house, under that tree and with the baby soon to come, they found something stronger than old pain. They found hope. The birth came quietly, not with panic, not with rushing, but in the still hours before dawn. The city was asleep. The world was quiet. Zawadi's face was sweaty, her hands gripping the bed. Her breath came steady. Alistair stood beside her, holding her hand tightly. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The silence was full of trust. Finally, the baby arrived. A sharp cry filled the room, clear and strong. The nurses placed the tiny baby on Zawadi's chest. The little girl's skin was soft and pink, her small fist curled tight, her hair a halo of dark curls. Zawadi held her as if she had always known her. Her body curved around the baby like she was born to protect her. Alistair's eyes filled with tears, not from fear, but from wonder. A nurse asked, "What's her name?" Zawadi didn't look away from the baby. "Her name is Hope," she said. Alistair closed his eyes for a moment, keeping the word inside him. When he opened them, Zawadi was looking at him with quiet understanding. Hope wasn't just a name. It was what had brought them here. It was why they showed up when it mattered most. In the days that followed, the hospital room became a small, warm cocoon. Nurses came and went, doctors checked on them, paperwork was done, but inside that sunlit room, a quiet closeness grew. Alistair stayed, not because someone told him to, but because there was no other place he wanted to be. He changed baby diapers with clumsy hands and rocked baby Hope in the blue chair he had built all by himself. Zawadi watched him, not with doubt, but with curiosity. Slowly, her curiosity turned into trust. When Zawadi slept, Alistair held the baby and whispered little stories he had never told anyone. He spoke about the father he never really knew. He told about the time he almost gave up on life, and about the moment he saw Zawadi again and felt like time had stopped, turning into something eternal. One afternoon, Alistair sat down to fill out the birth certificate. Pen in hand, he paused for only a moment before writing his name next to hers. There was no law making him do it. No one pushed him. It was his choice. And he made it quietly, the way a man walks into a room he already belongs to. Zawadi watched from her bed. She didn't say a word. But when their eyes met, something gentle passed between them. It wasn't forgiveness, and it wasn't perfect certainty. It was simply a quiet agreement that the past would be just one chapter in a much longer story. Weeks passed. The seasons changed. The air became warmer, and their new house began to feel like a second skin around them. Zawadi started painting again. She painted small canvases at first, pictures of mothers and children filled with strong colors and deep meanings. Alistair worked part-time at the community center. In the mornings, he helped organize art classes for children. In the afternoons, he fixed things around the house. Soon they found a rhythm of life that did not need labels. Some nights they shared dinner together. Other nights they shared silence. Alistair knew when to give Zawadi space and when to hold the baby so she could rest. She knew when to ask him to stay close and when to let him find peace in his own quiet moments. Their life wasn't perfect. There were times when shadows from the past crept in, reminding them of old promises and broken trust, but those times came less and less often. And when they did come, they didn't last long. The old hurts turned into scars, not wounds. They became proof that something had been mended instead of replaced. One evening, they stood under the big tree in their backyard. Baby Hope was asleep inside, the baby monitor glowing faintly on the porch. The wind moved through the branches with a sound like a soft breath. The moon covered the grass with silver light. Alistair reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He did not kneel. He did not give a long speech. He simply opened the box. Inside was a simple gold ring. His eyes said everything. Zawadi stared at the ring for a long time. She was not afraid. She was not unsure. She was simply feeling the weight of the moment. "I'm not the same woman you left," she said, "and I'm not here to save you from your past." Alistair smiled softly. His voice was steady. "I'm not asking you to save me. I'm asking if I can walk beside you now, as the man who stayed." She looked at him, not as the man from the past, but as the man he had become. Slowly, she nodded. Yes. They married right there, beneath the tree. It was simple, just them, Baby Hope in her mother's arms, and a few friends from the gallery and the community center. There were no written vows, no music, except the singing of birds and the laughter of children. It was a quiet wedding, filled with soft eyes, held hands, and the belief that love, when given a second chance, could become even stronger than love that had never been broken. That night, Alistair rocked Baby Hope on the porch while Zawadi painted inside by the light of a lamp. Their new life grew slowly, not as a return to what once was, but as a brand new beginning. In the stillness of that night, with hope alive in their hearts and the hum of possibility all around them, they were no longer just two people who had found each other again. They were a family. They were a home. They had come full circle. And for the first time in a very long while, everything felt like it had finally arrived exactly where it was meant to be. Thank you for joining us on this touching journey of love, loss, and finding each other again. If this story touched your heart, we would love to hear your thoughts. Tell us in the comments what moved you the most. Your voice is important to us. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss a new story. And let us know where in the world you are listening from. Until next time, take care, stay inspired, and always believe in second chances.